What's going on, guys? And welcome back to Rivalries on the WWE podcast on this Friday, June 4th, as we really approach the summer here. And you may sense a bit of a different tone in my voice, and I think that is in large part due to the releases by WWE earlier on this week, specifically Braun Stroman. And this episode of Rivalries will not be about a rivalry. It will just be a recap on the career of Braun Strowman that lasted just about 6 full years. And I wanted to do a rivalry of Braun Strowman because I really think that in a lot of ways he is the most underutilized talent and missed opportunity the company has ever seen. But while I was looking to do a big rivalry involving Strowman, I never really came across one that really warranted doing an entire episode on. Like, you could have made the case for Roman Reigns in 2016, which in a lot of ways was his first big singles feud, or the one with Bray Wyatt last year, but none of those ever really culminated into a big pay-per-view match. Or, even with Bray Wyatt at their match at SummerSlam, I really don't think it ever had that big time feel. And I just thought it would be more appropriate to go step by step, kind of year by year, and do an entire recap of Braun Strowman's career. But before we get into that, I want to kind of talk about the releases as a whole. And just from a talent perspective, because I know there were releases behind the scenes in the offices, even some commentators, but I'm going to talk about it specifically to the talent. And Braun Strowman, Aleister Black, Buddy Murphy, Ruby Riott, and I believe someone from NXT that I'm not familiar with. And it's getting to a point now in WWE that you're almost expecting them to mismanage guys and really just expecting them to botch talent and eventually part ways with them. And I think I realized that the most with Braun Strowman because Strowman, not even 2-3 weeks ago, was in the main event for the WWE Championship. Not even a year ago, he was holding the Universal Championship, which he won at WrestleMania. And in a lot of ways was pushed as the next big dominant big man to kind of succeed the roles that were previously held by Big Show, Kane, Undertaker to a lesser extent. But then you even go down the list and you look at a guy like Buddy Murphy, who they really invested in, I thought, long term, dating back to late 2018 or 2019, sorry, in late 2019. And he had that crazy SmackDown match with Roman Reigns that we all still talk about to this day. He aligned himself with Seth Rollins. And then he eventually did that split from Rollins after he turned babyface and was dating Aaliyah, which was a terrible program. But he always was referred to as WWE's best kept secret, and it's going to be turned into a guy that we will never have found out about in terms of his true potential. And then you look at someone like Aleister Black, who I thought what they were doing with recently, him reading the storybook of his dad being Satan, and then he comes in and hits Big E with the Black Mass on SmackDown 2 weeks ago. He's another guy that I remember this year around this time, or this time last year rather, I was saying like, man, Aleister Black versus Drew McIntyre at next year's WrestleMania 37 that just passed, that could be something special. And Aleister Black seemed like that guy that would eventually become a really dark heel. And, his in-ring ability is like second to none, really unique look. That dark kind of gimmick, almost akin to The Undertaker, but he put his own authentic spin on it. Just a really sad state to see them miss a guy like Aleister Black, and even more so than Buddy Murphy, because I don't think that Murphy would have ever amounted to much more than, let's say, a very good mid-carder, kind of like a semi-regular Intercontinental Champion, United States Champion type of contender. But Aleister Black, I feel like, could have been a main event talent, specifically as a heel. And I thought we were getting glimpses of that in recent weeks leading up to him interfering in the Fatal 4-Way, hitting Big E with Black Mass, and now we will never get to see where that potential program with Big E would have gone. And then we get to Ruby Riott, who I think, as far as the women's division goes, is the most underutilized talent that I've seen in a number of years. And probably ever since the women's revolution. My God, I almost said Divas Revolution. I'm sorry, guys. Ever since the women's evolution started, or revolution, whatever it is, I thought that she was the most underutilized talent. And I remember when they debuted the Riot Squad, and you kind of had Liv Morgan and Sarah Logan as the tag team, and Ruby Riott as kind of like the leader, and someone who even challenged Charlotte Flair for the SmackDown Women's Championship back in 2018. I believe it was at Fastlane. And I thought that she was a fantastic talent, and I really thought that eventually she was going to become one of the women's champions, either on Raw or on SmackDown. After a couple of years, it became clear that they weren't going to do that with her, and I kind of came to terms with the fact that maybe she was never going to be a main event talent for the women. But then when they put her back with Liv Morgan and they rebooted the Riot Squad, kind of like aside from Sarah Logan, I said, okay, well, they can push this tag team as one of the premier tag teams in the WWE. And they couldn't even do that. And I don't think we'll ever truly know what we missed out on with Ruby Riott. And it's a damn shame. And I completely forgot about Lana. And as far as Lana goes, I think that's one of those talents that, I mean, I'm not exactly shocked. But to be honest, I'm not exactly shocked of any of these releases besides Braun Stroman. But Lana is the one that I could kind of justify in a weird way. Like, I respect what Lana has done, you know, going from just a valet heel manager to Rusev to being a decent, passable in-ring competitor. But she never really found her niche. And it seemed like they were pushing her really hard, especially given the fact that she was the sole survivor for Team Raw at last year's Survivor Series 5-on-5 match for the women. And then, you know, she had the program with Nia Jax that never really went anywhere. They aligned her with Naomi, and she basically just adopted Naomi's gimmick to form that tag team. But of all the talent released this past week, I would say Lana is the one that is going to be of the least consequence in the grand scheme of things. So now to tie it all the way back into Braun Strowman, which is what the primary topic of this podcast will be about. Unlike the other four, Braun Strowman is the one that really kind of just completely shocked me. Like, I just sung the praises of Black and Ruby Riott, and to an extent Buddy Murphy as well, but I wasn't surprised. Like, have we even really seen Buddy Murphy on television since that program with Seth and the Mysterios culminated, in late 2020? I mean, he's made some sporadic appearances. You know, they've hinted at a reunion with him and Seth Rollins, which probably would have been the best avenue to go down. So I wasn't shocked about that. Ruby Riott, you know, mismanaged for the last 3-4 years. So again, not really shocked that they ended up releasing her. And as for Aleister Black, shocked me a bit more than the other two, but again, at the end of the day, when's the last time Aleister Black had a match? I mean, last time I could think of him in a ring is when he had that 2-3 week long program with Kevin Owens back in the fall when he had the eye patch on. But aside from that, you know, we saw him do a couple of promos that I thought were very, very good, but again, not overly shocked. Braun Strowman is a guy that they long-term invested into going back to 2015. And we'll start right from the beginning when he first stepped foot into the WWE. And his first ever appearance in WWE was when he inserted himself into the Roman Reigns-Bray Wyatt feud back in the summer of 2015.
Look at Roman fight back. We're going to do the same thing to Roman, what he's done to so many people. That with the help of his partner. Now it's Bray Wyatt. Covers Sister Abigail. Reigns. Superman punch. Change of plans. Ambrose going up top. Down goes Harper. Reigns and Ambrose dominating right now. And then there were two. This guy's a monster. Look at the size of it. Roman Reigns says, here we go. The man just caught Reigns. Oh, my gosh. Drew Reigns like a small child. Ambrose trying to figure out what the hell he's looking at. Reigns and Ambrose, and this big monster has swatted Reigns away. He's got him on the face. What the face? He's choking him out. Look at this. Roman Reigns is going limp. Roman Reigns limp. He's out. He's out, John. What is going on? Who the hell is that? What the hell is that?
So he debuts in a tag team match between Luke Harper and Bray Wyatt against Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose, as it had kind of evolved over the course of the summer from Wyatt versus Reigns to the Wyatt family versus, kind of a portion of the Shield. At this point, Seth Rollins was on his own as the WWE champion and the figurehead of the Authority. And essentially, they debuted him as the Black Sheep, and he almost kind of took the place of Eric Rowan in a lot of ways. Eric Rowan was away with injury, and, he showed up with the Black Sheep mask. And I really thought that the way they built him early on was perfect. They hid him in the Wyatt family. He was clearly green, not a ton of wrestling experience, did not go to NXT before showing up on the main roster. And obviously, he had the look to be in the Wyatt family. And over the course of the next several months, he was in the tag team match at SummerSlam, the 3-on-3 match when Jericho came back to tag with Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose. And he kind of just was insulated behind the Wyatt family. Like, you didn't see too much of him. They sheltered him a bit. They eased him in. And, even at the tag team match at Survivor Series, when you had the Wyatt family versus The Undertaker and Kane, Undertaker and Kane just chokeslammed him, gave him a double chokeslam through the table on the outside. He never really got in the match. They really protected Braun Strowman properly here. And I remember that you started hearing rumblings that maybe it was going to be him versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania. Like, you have to understand that at this point, Bray Wyatt and Undertaker had just had their WrestleMania match, so you're kind of playing off of that, which would have been a perfect segue into Braun Strowman versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania. Then there were rumblings that they were going to have the Wyatt family kind of clash with Brock Lesnar, which, in my opinion, was one of the biggest missed opportunities ever. I talked about this past week on the What If segment with Matt, where they kind of built to the Wyatt family going against Brock Lesnar, and then they just never really did anything with it, which was just really, really too bad. And they kind of kept him sheltered for the first calendar year, which was the best course of action. It was. And I remember his last program with the Wyatt family was kind of against the New Day in the summer of 2016. And in the summer of 2016 is when they reintroduced the brand extension. When Shane McMahon came back, he became the commissioner of SmackDown, and Stephanie McMahon became the commissioner of Raw. And as we know, the rules for the brand extension, well, more times than not, they change this somewhat regularly. But the typical rules for the brand extensions is tag teams / factions come as a pair unless they are chosen individually, kind of like what we saw this past draft with the New Day. And lo and behold, this is when they decide to pull the trigger on pushing Braun Strowman as a singles competitor, as they send all the other members of the Wyatt family to SmackDown, Bray, Luke Harper, Eric Rowan, and Braun Strowman went to Monday Night Raw. And this is when you started to really see them make Braun Strowman his own character. Obviously, he got new theme music. He cut his hair differently. That's when he went away from just the regular curly long hair and gave himself the ponytail. And they started to just ease him in as a typical big monster. And if you remember, you had the ongoing weekly thing between him and Mick Foley that he wanted better competition. He thought this stuff was too easy. And they were building him the proper way as just this big evil monster. And, then he had the short program with Sami Zayn, and Mick Foley was always a part of that with Braun Strowman, which I thought Mick Foley did a very good job of helping Braun Strowman build into that monster heel role. And it ultimately culminated within the first 4 months of him being on his own on Monday Night Raw. It led to him being on Team Raw for the 5-on-5 match at Survivor Series, Raw versus SmackDown. And even in that match, we saw that Braun Strowman was protected by creative and writing, and that was the proper decision. If I remember correctly, he didn't even get pinned. He got put through a table on the outside and counted out. So they were doing a very good job of protecting Braun Strowman in keeping him billed as this big monster heel. And then we get to the Royal Rumble when it's Kevin Owens versus Roman Reigns for the Universal Championship. And you have Chris Jericho suspended above the ring in a shark cage because, as we remember, him and Kevin Owens were best friends at the time and kind of like the top two heels on Monday Night Raw. And at the end of this match between Reigns and Kevin Owens, when it seemed that Reigns had the victory all but one, we got our first taste of Braun Strowman ever really stepping foot into the main event scene to start on a one-on-one program.
The announce table will put Owens away. Roman Reigns with Kevin Owens up high. Tremendous power by Reigns. This is shield-like for Roman Reigns. Kevin Owens to the announce table. Owens shattering the announce table.
I think that was Roman Reigns' way of putting an exclamation point on this match.
Kevin Owens is out cold. First through the chairs, then through the announce table. Roman Reigns closing in perhaps on the Universal Championship. Reigns lying in wait.
Owens is vulnerable. Owens is in trouble.
Big dog stalking Owens. What the hell? Oh my God, who the hell? Braun Strowman. Braun Strowman. Braun Strowman's here. Braun Strowman's here. He's attacking Reigns. It's no disqualification. This is all legal.
Watch out, watch out.
Reigns. And he just bounced Roman Reigns off the German announce table.
Why?
Braun Strowman, that mountain of a man has assaulted Reigns.
Why?
And he's not done yet.
Why?
Roman Reigns and Goldberg speared Braun Strowman on Monday Night Raw. And now Strowman sending Reigns to a table. Don't forget Reigns also speared Strowman on the stage a couple of weeks ago. And Strowman, he may be here for revenge. Braun Strowman just laid waste to Roman Reigns. The monster among men just destroyed the big dog. Braun Strowman says he does what he wants, when he wants.
Not like
And now
this.
Kevin Owens
Not like
is going to
this.
reap the benefits. Kevin Owens retains the Universal title.
And that pretty much kicked off what I would say is the biggest feud of Braun Strowman's career, and that was with Roman Reigns. And for the 6 months that followed this event, you kind of had Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman on and off repeatedly clashing. You know, at the following pay-per-view for Monday Night Raw at Fastlane, Roman Reigns defeated Braun Strowman, which kind of primed Roman Reigns up to face The Undertaker at WrestleMania 33. They later faced at Extreme Rules, or it wasn't Extreme Rules, it was Great Balls of Fire, in the ambulance match that Braun Strowman defeated Roman Reigns. And then they eventually clashed in the Fatal 4-Way match at SummerSlam with Brock Lesnar and Samoa Joe, one of the most brutal and physical Fatal 4-Way matches you'll ever see. But something in there kind of tells you, my God, easy enough for me to say, hey guys, tells you what management kind of thought of Braun Strowman at the time. And that's that during this run and this on and off kind of program with Roman Reigns, at WrestleMania 33, Roman Reigns main evented the show and defeated The Undertaker. And Braun Strowman was on the kickoff show in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, which he didn't win this year. He won it in 2019, but he didn't win it this year. And I think it was kind of telling because for the 8 months that preceded WrestleMania, you could make the case that he was one of the biggest breakout stars. And I think in 2017 as a whole, Braun Strowman was the breakout star in WWE. And, you know, he had clashes with Brock Lesnar. He had the on and off stuff with Roman Reigns. And he really kind of cemented himself as a main event guy in WWE during this time. And 2017, to me, is when he proved that he could work. He knew his character very well. And they really started trusting him as like I said, the heir to the throne of big guys, as, you know, the Big Show and Kane and all these guys. But I would argue that Braun Strowman was a better worker than them. Maybe not Kane in his prime, but we were about 8-9 years removed from Kane being like a true top level competitor in the ring by this point. Maybe not that long, at least 5. Let's just make it even 5. And Braun Strowman was really trending in that direction. And by the time the end of 2017 rolled around and we started getting into 2018, and Braun Strowman was well over a year into his singles run over on Monday Night Raw and completely detached away from the Wyatt family, we saw them really starting to pass the torch almost officially in that regard. And that kind of came to a head one night when he faced the Big Show on Monday Night Raw.
The top rope. Big Show looked like he was going to come off the top. Now Braun Strowman looking for a superplex, perhaps of his own. Strowman and Big Show. No way. Above the ring, Big Show going to the top rope now. What? No way. This can't be possible. What on earth? Oh my God! The ring just imploded. Wow. You gotta be kidding me! I can't.
So this was in April of 2017, and they do the famous ring collapse, as they always try and recreate what happened with Brock and Big Show in 2003. And this was almost kind of like the official passing of the torch, that Braun Strowman was, getting the rub from the Big Show, getting the victory over him. And then they had a couple other clashes, but him going over on the Big Show is something that kind of really put him at the top of the food chain as far as the big men went. And like I said, this was 3 months shy of him being in his singles push on Monday Night Raw. And then in late 2017, he started his program with Kane that bled into the beginning of 2018. And I think by the time you got to 2018, he had defeated the Big Show, he had defeated Kane, and then they started to turn him babyface. And a year and a half into his singles push, and you're approaching WrestleMania 2018, WrestleMania 34, And, he's involved in the men's elimination chamber that was eventually won by Roman Reigns. You kind of start to see the writing on the wall here that, okay, they're pushing Braun Strowman as a main eventer. But once again, by the time WrestleMania rolls around, much like what happened the year prior, except now we're a year and a half into his singles push, not just 6 months in, we see Braun Strowman start to get mismanaged again. And it leads to, you guys remember it, his tag team victory with Nicholas over the Bar at WrestleMania 34. And look, I don't maybe hate on this as much as most of you guys and most pundits. And I respected what they were doing. And he genuinely seems like a good guy. Like Adam Scherr seems like a genuinely really good dude. And I think maybe that's why I felt the need to do this show, because I think the actual person seems like he overcame a lot in his life to get where he is. And even the fact of how he changed his physique, when you look at what he looked like when he debuted to what he looked like when he was released just this week, the guy got shredded. He must have lost at least 40, 50 pounds. Really good shape. Just such an admirable job. But getting back on track here, it's not so much that I hated the moment itself. It was a funny moment. It was a cool moment. I'm sure that kid will remember it for the rest of his life. But where Braun Strowman was in early 2018, leading up to WrestleMania 34, he deserved better than this. And that's just the fact of the matter, is that Braun Strowman deserved better than just being a throwaway tag team match that ultimately was meaningless, as he gave up the tag team championships the very next night because, hey, he won it with an 8-year-old. So, I mean, it was a cool moment, as it happened, but when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of a shame that, Braun Strowman's second consecutive WrestleMania, he really did not amount to a whole lot, and that was kind of like a recurring theme for Braun Strowman in the first several years of him as a singles competitor in WWE. And then as 2018 rolls along here, you kind of see Braun Strowman start to get pushed back up into that main event scene. He was getting pushed there in early 2018, took a dip at WrestleMania time, and then he starts to move his way slowly but surely back up the ranks. He wins the greatest Royal Rumble, the 50-man Royal Rumble in Saudi Arabia, and then he wins Money in the Bank. And he won Money in the Bank, and at this point, Roman Reigns had won the Universal Championship away from Brock Lesnar, or there was a brief period where Brock was the champion and Roman Reigns had it, and leading up to their match at SummerSlam, Braun was kind of playing a factor in that. I remember in the championship match at SummerSlam, Braun walked to the ring, make it believe he was going to cash in, and then Brock attacked him on the outside, chucked his contract up the ramp, which led to Roman Reigns getting the victory and winning the Universal Championship at long last, ending the year-and-a-half-long reign of Brock Lesnar in the summer of 2018. And then obviously Brock goes away for a bit, and they kind of shift the feud of the Universal Championship over to Braun Strowman against Roman Reigns. And this is where I think they kind of made a mistake here, is that they start the Shield back up again, and you have the Shield kind of rebirth and go against Braun Strowman on that Monday Night Raw. I don't know if you guys remember, where Braun Strowman is about to cash in. At this point, remember, Braun Strowman's a babyface, Roman Reigns is a babyface, and Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins come out all in their Shield gear to make the save on Roman Reigns and halt the cash-in of Braun Strowman. And this leads to a heel turn with Braun Strowman, and he aligns himself with Dolph Ziggler and Drew McIntyre, as he called it, his pack, and they kind of became the guys to combat the Shield. And it kind of flopped, in a lot of ways. A lot of that I had to do with, obviously, Roman Reigns getting diagnosed with cancer and having to give up the championship. And then it led to a match between Braun Strowman versus Brock Lesnar for the Universal Championship to which Brock Lesnar once again regains the Universal Championship heading into WrestleMania season. And I'm not saying that Braun Strowman would have been the right choice to become the Universal Champion in light of Roman Reigns, going down with his cancer diagnosis. But it started to get to a point with Braun Strowman here, after the failed heel run with Dolph and Seth. I keep saying Dolph and Seth. Dolph and Drew against the Shield, and then they turn him back babyface to make up for the fact that Roman Reigns just got hurt. He started to kind of become like a yo-yo here, and through no fault of his own, but it became a point where it's just like, okay, so Braun's going to be in the main event, he's going to look like a monster, and then he's going to lose. And that kind of became the story of Braun Strowman, even as we got into 2019. And in 2019, early 2019, Seth was obviously on his mega run, but, it comes down to Braun Strowman against Seth in the Royal Rumble, and Seth gets the victory. And I love what Braun Strowman was doing in 2019, or by the time you got to early 2019. Like, I remember he was working a lot with Baron Corbin at this time. That's when Baron Corbin, Lashley, and Drew McIntyre kind of like formed a heel faction. They took out Braun. And I went to a house show in Ottawa, close to my house, and him and Corbin had a very good match. And I remember at that house show in early 2019, I believe it was in February, like, he was the star of that show. And Braun Strowman, he was kind of number 2 to Seth Rollins at this point as far as babyfaces went in the company. Obviously, Seth won the Universal Championship, and they're building him to go against Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. But Braun Strowman was right under that. But then WrestleMania comes around yet again, and he's feuding with the guys from Saturday Night Live leading up to the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. My God, I'm having a hard time speaking today, hey guys? And again, just another example of Braun Strowman kind of being built up, and then plateauing and just like ultimately leading to nothing. And once again at a WrestleMania, he does a whole lot of nothing here. And then in 2019, following WrestleMania, they start building him back up again. He kind of went away for a bit. He comes back following SummerSlam. He wins the tag team championships with Seth Rollins, and they have a program for the Universal Championship. And he ultimately gets, he loses relatively clean, and then he fades back into obscurity, for a lack of better terms. And I remember on an episode of Monday Night Raw, The Fiend attacks him, and then that led to nowhere, at least in the immediate future. And it was just yet again another example, that short program he had with Seth at the end of the summer of 2019 and in early fall, where, they build him up as this big monster. They put him in the championship picture, and then he ultimately can't get the job done once again. So then we go back to the brand extension here, as by the summer of 2019, you had the wild card rule, and it was as if it didn't exist anymore. But with SmackDown moving to Fox in October, they go back to the strict brand extension rules. And I'll give them credit where credit is due. They're almost 2 years into it, and for the most part, they have abided by these rules, for the most part. So I'll give them credit. And he goes to SmackDown, and this is the first time that Braun is ever exclusive to SmackDown. And I thought this was going to be his coming out party. I really thought so. And at this point, I was kind of wondering, he had only won a tag team championship at this point in WWE. And I said to myself, okay, the Intercontinental Championship is going to SmackDown. They'll give him the Intercontinental Championship, and even if he'll never become a world champion, this will be, they'll find his niche. And he got a run with the Intercontinental Championship, but he had it for a month or so before dropping it to Sami Zayn after he defeated Nakamura for it. And once again, at least he won a title in this instance, but in the summer or in the winter of 2020, it was just another example of, they build him up. He's kind of like the babyface right under Roman Reigns on SmackDown, and he wins the Intercontinental Championship, and I think that they're going to give him this big, long run to kind of solidify him as a singles champion, make that championship feel important. and they pull the rug out from under him yet again. And then we get to when the pandemic hits, 15 months ago at this point. And, if it wasn't for that pandemic, Braun Strowman would not have been on WrestleMania. WrestleMania 36 would have come and gone, and it would have been another year of Braun Strowman not getting any legitimate and substantial role on the card, on the biggest pay-per-view of the year. But Roman Reigns obviously steps away due to family reasons in light of the pandemic, and he gets thrusted into Roman Reigns' role against Goldberg for the Universal Championship. And WrestleMania 36 comes, he goes against Goldberg for the biggest championship over on SmackDown, and it leads to the biggest victory in the career of Braun Strowman.
With everything they have.
Goldberg seems to be out of it. Braun Strowman now with Goldberg on his shoulder. Emphatic running power slam. Here's the cover. Up for the leg. And after four power slams, Strowman wins the title. Here is your winner and the new Universal Champion, Braun Strowman.
For the first time in his WWE career, Braun Strowman is the Universal Champion, dominating Goldberg here tonight.
So he wins the Universal Championship, and just watching that back, and I'm sure you guys could hear it, it's just such a weird feeling watching the product when, the pandemic first hit and they were doing it in the Performance Center in front of nobody, like no piped in crowd noise. And as much as I'm not a fan of the Thunderdome and can't wait to get back in front of real fans, which we're quickly approaching, by the way, it really makes you appreciate what they did with the Thunderdome and how good of a product that was. And or how good of a product it is in terms of what it was before in the Performance Center, especially before they put in, the NXT talent to, kind of play the part of fans. But, they give him the championship. He gets a world title under his belt at least. But again, it's like he only wins this championship because A, Roman Reigns stepped away, and B, Goldberg wasn't going to hold the title beyond WrestleMania. And, I think he did all right with the Universal Championship over on SmackDown this time last year. I really liked his program with Bray Wyatt. I felt like he showed a new dimension to his character, and I think he did as good as he could have. But lo and behold, as soon as Roman Reigns came back, Braun Strowman dropped it that same night. He dropped the belt to Bray Wyatt at SummerSlam. Roman Reigns came back that very night, and Roman Reigns won the championship back a week later at the following pay-per-view. I forget what the name escapes me right now. Maybe it was Backlash. I'm not sure what it was. And ever since, Roman Reigns has been the face of SmackDown. And that's what the plan was. And it was clear that Braun Strowman was just a placeholder until Roman Reigns came back. And that rang true and has rung true for the past 10 months. And Braun Strowman then went to Monday Night Raw at the draft. And on Monday Night Raw, I thought that he was doing an all right job, but it became very, very clear what the role for Braun Strowman was going to be, forever going to be. And he was going to be the guy that they would always, always build as, that unstoppable monster, and they would build him as this, the locomotive, the train, the Strowman Express. No one could stop him until when all the chips were down and it was a pay-per-view match, and then he would inevitably lose. And I mean, he beat Shane McMahon in a cage match at this past year's WrestleMania. But I mean, when does Shane McMahon ever win at WrestleMania? To be fair, I think the only time he's ever won at WrestleMania was against Vince McMahon at WrestleMania 17. Actually, he beat The Miz at WrestleMania 35 a few years back, but, even that wasn't really a decisive victory. But as far as Strowman goes, I think the best way that you can describe his entire career is a missed opportunity. Because I know he really became one-dimensional, especially over the past 6 months or so, right around the time when they did the Survivor Series match. And I think that it wasn't his fault, and it was just creative, not really knowing what else to do with him. And him being released is indicative of that. And it's a shame because I really felt that last year during his program and rivalry with Bray Wyatt, he showed that he could have layers to his character, and he could make you feel for him, and he could draw you into his character emotionally just beyond like, I'm big mean strong man and I'm a train, I'm the monster among men and I yell when I talk. Matt's done a perfect job of describing what his character had evolved to. But this time last year, I don't think we were having those discussions when he was over on SmackDown as pretty much the guy carrying that brand. And it's crazy to say that, but I mean, Jey Uso was nowhere to be found. Roman Reigns wasn't on television. Cesaro was, I believe he was still on Monday Night Raw at that point, or even if he was on SmackDown, he was no substantial character. Seth Rollins was still on Monday Night Raw. Big E was still in the New Day. Like, it was Braun Strowman carrying that brand on his back last year around this time through the pandemic, and I think it's a shame how it turned out. And I'll just close it out with this, is that I feel for Braun Strowman, the character and the person, because he did such a hell of a job, in my mind, evolving himself both physically and into a character that I think it's a damn shame that what creative did with him and ultimately just releasing him. And he's going to land on his feet somewhere. There's no doubt in my mind that Braun Strowman will show up sooner rather than later. Maybe it will be AEW. Maybe it will be Ring of Honor. Who knows here? But Braun Strowman is too good of a talent not to show up somewhere soon in the world of professional wrestling. And I just want to say thank you, Braun Strowman. I really enjoyed your character. It was a bit bland at times, but through no fault of your own. That was creative's fault, but I don't think you could have done much more given how green you were when you showed up and what you brought yourself to be by the time that you left just this past week. And until next time, guys, you can get me on Twitter at ADeMarco25. You can get Matt on Twitter at wrestling_audio, or you can email him at realwwepodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, guys, I'll see you on the Strowman Express.